What is up, everybody? Solomon here. Super excited to be with Genfinity, interviewing a multitude of builders across Web3. These are our Hedera all-hands showcases. Want to give a huge shout out to Hashgraph, the premier wallet on the Hedera network, for helping us to put these together. There's a side of the Hedera network that many don't often see. We're going to be diving into data access within the Hashgraph, and the Hgraph team is joining us today. We've got Brandon, Tyler, and newly announced team member Brett. I think as we roll out here, which one of you guys wants to tackle the origin story of Hgraph? You know, kind of how it all began, and then we maybe roll in.
Suppose that it's probably a task for me. So our Hgraph started as pretty much a grassroots infrastructure project. Initially, we hosted some dedicated mirror nodes in the Hedera network to provide fast, reliable data access to early builders. So we had a kind of a small core team originally. As demand grew, we realized a little bit bigger opportunity. So we've evolved from kind of a core initial project to one of our first project was a GraphQL API for network data. So that's kind of how we started, by helping early builders, build data-powered applications.
Awesome. And I know you guys kind of really went full bore into kind of this, building out solutions, building out bare metal infrastructure within the ecosystem. Brandon, can you maybe describe a little bit why you guys chose to kind of go the route that you went with the solutions that you were trying to provide within the ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to be here, and it's nice to have the whole team here, the trifecta. Basically for us, as Tyler said, starting out, helping people in the ecosystem in Hedera, we operate multiple mirror nodes, and the data space on Hedera isn't necessarily, an easy business, but like, as we say on our website, we love hard problems. And I think tackling that head on, what you realize is you need to invest in hardware, you need to invest in infrastructure. That's how these networks decentralize. So Hgraph is now in a place as a company where we own and operate multiple, mirror nodes and custom nodes. And this just allows us to bring so much more customization to these APIs, like the GraphQL API that Tyler mentioned, the REST API, the JSON RPC. It's a strategy we're taking in Hedera and other networks as well, which is bring these products and services that are first class for the network. And when you own and operate the hardware, you can have so much more control in how you optimize the data, the software, and ultimately how fast people can get that information. One of the key pieces of feedback we've received this year is just how important that speed and reliability is for people. So this year, that redundancy and speed is a huge focus for us. But when you own and operate your own hardware, you really are playing the Web3 game, and there's so much more you can offer. So I think that's really why we made that decision, and that was an initiative on Tyler's end that was just incredible.
I think before we get too far, I know you guys have made strides in 2025. So I want to hear from Brett, because Brett, you had your recent announcement of joining the Hgraph team. Tell everybody, or I guess you can introduce yourself. Tell everybody a little bit about what your background was and what role you're serving to grow out the Hgraph.
Sure.
Suite.
Yeah, happy to do it, and appreciate you having us. Hey guys, my name's Brett Williamson. I am the head of business development at Hgraph. My background's in traditional financial services. I spent about 13 years at UBS, Standard Chartered Bank, and Wells Fargo. Most recently focused on a lot of the M&A divestiture and strategic investment work from the risk side for Wells Fargo. I started in financial crimes compliance, which is interesting to a lot of people as well, particularly in this space, but ultimately got into more of the deal-making side as my career progressed. As it relates to your question about what we're doing on the custom solutions side, so custom solutions is incredibly broad. We can build, for the most part, anything. Our team is incredibly talented, but work on building unique solutions for startups, enterprises, governments, and NGOs. Again, very broad, but the reality is what we're doing is we understand the market. We understand particularly financial services, as that's my background, and we're going to ultimately build custom solutions based on what entities need, right? And that's on us to find out what entities need, whether it's through a discovery exercise or whether it's through just understanding how businesses operate and bringing solutions that help expand margins and improve business outcomes, particularly for customers of the businesses that we work with.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you guys are kind of at this pivotal point, and I kind of look at what you guys are doing as, we have a lot of kind of like projects throughout the space. You guys are building out kind of a long-term, actual business that can integrate with the technology and maybe provide that intersection for clients that you may deal with, for data access or maybe even advisory and different types of things that I feel like it's interesting because if you look at a lot of the Web3 ecosystems, there's kind of these, maybe a few entities that are kind of tied closely to the core entity, and then you have all these kind of partnerships that are out there in the wild that a lot of people don't really get to see what goes on within those partnerships. And then you have retail, and we're all just kind of sitting here like, wondering what's happening on these networks. You guys are kind of like, spinning up a long-term, like sustainable entity that's, can really drive forward growth of the network, but not being attached directly within, some of the entities within the ecosystem itself. When you think about like long-term sustainability, and what you guys are trying to build out, I guess, Brandon or Tyler, where are you guys at right now with the solutions that you're providing, and who are you providing them to, and how do you imagine that changing, let's say in the near term?
I can dive into that, and then maybe I'll throw it to Tyler and kind of what I'll speak to the now, and Tyler can speak to the future. Is right now, as Brett was saying, we're seeing a lot of really great traction with the partners and organizations that we're talking with. We have some really exciting projects that we're working on, some that we can't talk about. And then from the product side, the rate of adoption of our data access services for Hedera through our APIs, and especially as we see the need for EVM tooling and also just the adoption of Hedera in general grow, our coverage in the ecosystem is expanding. So it's safe to say, for folks watching right now, if you've used a Hedera product today, or like Hashpack or Saucer Swap or Bonzo Finance or wherever those projects live, there's a great chance, or almost certain chance, that you've interacted with our data in some way. And so it's really on us to bring that stability to the ecosystem, and I think that we're seeing traction in that area. And the product side and the other side of our business, the kind of consulting, bespoke services side, kind of that you have up here, Ryan, is they work together in those ways, and I think that is what creates a foundation for us to kind of build upon and continue growing outwards. But Tyler, maybe I'll throw it to you. You can kind of speak to the future of that, or if I missed anything.
Yeah. So, I guess I see our core opportunity as providing a cohesive graph of blockchain data, both public and private data, across the top networks. And I think we have some competitive advantage of being able to deliver on, being able to present and store and analyze data across different networks. There's a variety of different tools that we've already seen, in our, I guess our incubation period, more or less, of being able to see different use cases where, having the types of, I guess, access to our APIs and databases and, process data can help different folks, whether it be from a security standpoint, whether it be from a consumer-facing app, whether it be from an analytics standpoint. Our goal is to, be a go-to provider for, other groups, other companies that, build in DLT. And, I think at some point, DLT, I don't know how many years in the future, we might not be able to say we're so early, because the maturity of the technology will continue to advance. And I think, I guess our intention is to to really be a core part of helping organizations adopt the technology for the real world use cases that make end users' lives better, and businesses function better. Is kind of our
yeah. No, totally. And I think, it's a really interesting point what you guys are building out too, because I think we're in the crypto industry where we like to invent arbitrary KPIs that really don't mean anything. There was a study, I just had the Algorand team on this morning, and they actually did a study a couple of days ago, which was, I found it an interesting study for all of blockchain, where they basically were saying, does TVL have direct correlation to, token prices or whatever it may be? And they kind of had this long study. And I've always kind of thought about that as a specific example too, where like, okay, you have this metric that's TVL, but that's not really giving you a metric with real activity, like active users on the network. You kind of just have, okay, well, what's potentially come into the network? Is it still liquid if it's in the network? Has, is part of that TVL from projects that rugged? Is it liquid to the point that you can still move something? Is it moving? Is it just locked up and never moving? And I think when you get into like real world businesses and real world solutions, all that they're going to care about are KPIs that actually either save them money through making processes quicker, cheaper, whatever it may be. So I think it's really interesting. Like, you guys are actually building out infrastructure for like real world adoption of the technology. And where do you see the opportunity going in the near future? Because I feel like there's not a lot of external kind of infrastructure providers outside of like core entities, especially in Hedera. There's some, but not many. Where do you see that opportunity going in the future? What role do you guys feel like you might play in tandem with some of the big entities that are kind of out there in the wild, or with startups?
Yeah, I'll take that one. That's a great question. I think a lot of it is meeting customers where they are and understanding the end user, right? The vast majority of the population does not even interact or engage in the actual underlying technology at this point. Sure, they might buy Bitcoin on an exchange or what have you, but the reality is a lot of them aren't involved deeply in the ecosystem. And the way that I see it being adopted is by forming hybrid solutions, right, with some of these entities. Again, I'm deferring to banks because that's what I know, but who says there can't be a wallet that has fiat and crypto in it over time, right? Who says that there aren't different solutions you can bring behind the scenes that help with liquidity or manage risk or what have you between fiat and crypto. So I think some of the adoption is going to come from meeting, understanding end users and the vast majority of the population, and building solutions that seamlessly enable them to use blockchain without knowing that they're even using it, right? Some of the underlying technology. So that's where I see things headed personally.
Well, and you see like, see some of like the patents that some of these big banking, and this is just as an example, big banking entities are kind of putting together with kind of these multi-currency wallets where it could be a mix between fiat and digital assets. And that's interesting to me because like they're talking about what can be built, not what needs to be present for it to be built. And when I get into what needs to be present for something like that to actually go live and be adopted at scale, you get into all sorts of compliance things, you get into jurisdictional things. And at the end of the day, all of the stuff that's going to drive forward compliance engines that interoperate with DLT are going to come on the back end of like data to be used to verify those things. And I think that that's kind of a really interesting opportunity for you guys as well, where, as the real world adoption occurs, it's going to occur in tandem with, how can I access, what can I do with this data? How easily accessible is this data? Like, I think it's pretty interesting. And, you guys have here is one of the big things on your site, the kind of convergence of artificial intelligence and DLT. And I think that's a really interesting thought process as well, with how important does that data become within these automated agents? Brandon, I don't know if you want to maybe tackle where you guys see your role at regarding those, two pieces of technology and Hgraph. That'd be great.
How much time do you have?
We could do a whole space on AI.
I mean, to put it succinctly, I mean, for us internally, it's a pretty simple equation. A lot of people talk about that intersection of DLT and AI, right? And when you think about the engine that actually makes that move, it is data, and it is the rails for that data. And maybe I'll speak to something interesting, kind of that's very topical right now, which is I just finished judging many of the submissions for the Hedera AI hackathon, and so at the grassroots level, we're starting to see this kind of adoption in an interesting way, and we're starting to see some very like organic growth that we're participating in too, from whether it's from the just having these custom nodes and providing this infrastructure, but then also the standards and the tooling and the software needed to enable artificial intelligence to enact commerce with other agents or humans or devices. Hedera really seems to be the hotbed and the technology of choice for a lot of those early experiments, which has been very interesting. And then you look at it from the enterprise side, and of course that's also a key focus from the enterprise side. And many of those use cases may not touch DLT directly, but when you start to explore some of those use cases and you start to look at some of the issues that arise with auditability or transparency and different things like that, again, Hedera starts to come into the equation and DLT in general. So yeah, Hgraph, definitely, we find ourselves in an interesting space right now. And I think that for us, from a data standpoint, it's going to be so difficult initially to kind of track who's human and who's not. You know what I mean? And how this activity is kind of sliced up and understood. That we're going to have to come up with all sorts of new ways to measure these things. But we're also going to be able to build so many new exciting products and services. And a few things that were brought up when we talk about growing margin, or we talk about bringing in efficiencies, a lot of conversations surround these LLMs and open source models and things that you can give open queries to. And then there's another side to it, which is just these general AI workflows that I think a lot of companies tie in and leverage as well. And we're seeing, I'm seeing other companies in the ecosystem like Dovu and stuff doing really interesting things with AI, and Hashpack as well. They've got their concierge product in the wallet. So we're starting to see the customer behavior change, even also as we look at, as Brett said, meeting our customers where they're at. Now, a question you have to ask is that customer human or not, right? How do you have those entities be successful with your product? So it forces all new kinds of thinking. And I think that ultimately I do, being at Hgraph, I do, we feel a sense of responsibility, because being right at this intersection, there's a lot of opportunity for us, but there's also a lot that we can do to, be a steady hand to help guide this, especially in the Hedera ecosystem, as this stuff is just going crazy. But yeah, doing my best to keep it short as possible.
No, you're good. I think it's interesting to me to kind of look at, let's say, like infrastructure solutions versus like maybe platform solutions. And I kind of look at what you guys are doing as more of an infrastructure play that, can bridge out kind of wherever you guys want to bridge it out to. But what I find interesting is that you don't necessarily, well, I think kind of by default, everybody building on the network is going to need data access in some way, shape, or form, or potentially metrics around data or whatever it may be. It puts you guys in an interesting position, not only with the projects that are built right now, or with, even the retail community that's here right now, but even for, enterprises, whoever it may be. You're not necessarily like, you don't have to like really compete with another platform out there for data access, at least not right now in Hedera. And anybody can really integrate your solutions, because why wouldn't you want, faster access into data streams and all the other stuff that you guys are building out? Like, did you guys think about that ever, as like Hgraph as kind of infrastructure versus kind of like a I feel like a lot of projects just end up becoming like platforms that you have to like go to the platform and do X, Y, and Z, where any project can use the services of Hgraph. Any enterprise may want to use the services of Hgraph, even competing projects.
Yeah, I mean, our core product, in the end of the day, sends text back and forth. It's an API that an application calls, and there's nothing visual about it except to an end user when that data is processed, let's say in a wallet, or an analytics dashboard, or by an AI agent that is creating weights for different security parameters or risk parameters. So even if we start to classify is our product a SaaS? Is it software as a service? It's not necessarily software, because that's like a platform that does something. It's more of a I guess it's data access. It's the actual information coming down the wire, which doesn't inherently. It's kind of it's what software uses. So I think that's what our current core product is, and I think just to kind of expound upon that a little bit, I think maybe the hypothesis or the idea here is that I think we've been able to. I think we have a pretty good competitive advantage in where we started and what we've done. There's a whole bunch of groups and companies that need to have access to parts of information to be able to utilize it for them, and don't necessarily need to store the world's data. And as we see, for the rest of our lives, that number is going to be exabytes bigger and bigger and bigger over the course of time. And that's a challenging problem that I think a lot of different groups are trying to have. And what we've been focusing in on is really refining our core base, or our foundation, to be highly competitive and gain a competitive advantage at our current scale. I believe if we're able to compete with much better funded, I suppose, more funded companies at the current stage, they will not be able to compete with us in the future, is more or less the competitiveness outside of where I see our long-term sustainability being.
I'm gonna butcher this stat because it's not a stat; it's just an example. So just forewarning. But I saw a speech. So Ben Jorgensen from Constellation did a speech at DC Blockchain, and I'm gonna butcher this stat, but he did a study on how much data is produced by the world on a daily basis, and basically compared it to every grain of sand on the planet. And within, I think it's 5 years from now, or maybe by 2030. So much data will be produced on a daily basis that it basically represents every grain of sand on Earth within 9 days, or something some crazy stat like that. And by the way, I totally butchered that stat. We were kind of on the subject of DLT and artificial intelligence and agentic AI. I've got to ask you guys, because I'm assuming you do this, but maybe not. When you see announcements like what came out yesterday with Accenture, Equity Lab, Hedera Foundation, do you guys look at that as how do we get into a conversation immediately? Because Accenture Brett, I'm sure, knows probably more than many of us. Accenture is a monster. Accenture does tons of banking integrations globally. They're fairly large in artificial intelligence. I think about 7% market share right now. I think they have $3 billion in investments over the past year or two. And at the end of the day, for all of these solutions, regardless of what they are, they're going to need access to meaningful data. How do you guys kind of tackle that? Because there's so much that goes on in this space. Maybe just a broad question, how you guys kind of tackle that. Do you try to get into some sort of discussions, or am I asking too much? Whoever wants to take that one.
Yeah, just to be very direct, I think the answer is yes, right? We have the data. It comes down to understanding who the players are and whether we can add value, right? At the end of the day, a lot of folks already have connections, and they already have a general plan. So it's more of working to prove, right, at the end of the day, since we are a little bit smaller in nature but growing rapidly, that we are a viable and trustworthy partner for them. So that's the
yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew the answer to the question before I asked it. Obviously,
I'll actually just quickly speak to that too. I think that maybe one way to reframe the question too is like, you know, when you see these headlines come out and these things happening in the space, and naturally folks might conclude that, you know, Hgraph would be a natural fit. Obviously, we're growing as a company, and we're growing in opportunities. And I think that the one key differentiator that makes Hgraph unique, that, you know, is because we focus on providing that ecosystem first tooling and service, you know, in Hedera, that being kind of like Hedera first, when some of these broader companies and organizations come to us, sometimes they are surprised and delighted at how valuable kind of some of the special knowledge is when it comes to just being boots on the ground. I mean, just for example, you know, we do the work for you know, Reown and Wallet Connect and those integrations. And we've got some exciting things to share soon. And we're working with ecosystem partners across the table in this, you know, multi-year initiative. That's just one example against all the different groups and initiatives that we're a part of. But when you have that grassroots boots on the ground stuff, building with these smaller projects that will be the future hash packs and future Hgraphs, I think that that's some of the stuff that some of these enterprises want access to. And in this ecosystem, it's such a hotbed and it's so rich for innovation. And so I think that that is a unique aspect of what we bring to the table that we've noticed, and something I think that a lot of organizations find exciting and that we can bring to other ecosystems as well.
so I know you've mentioned a couple of times the potential for other ecosystems. Do you guys feel like you know, in the near term or medium term, there might be a focus on kind of expanding out, or what's kind of the game plan there? Whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Yeah, we're definitely. It's the near term, and the medium term, and the long term. I guess I would say to that. I know we've gone with a strategy, and I'd say like incubation, as we, you know, begin to find our efficiencies, begin to find our successes, begin to find what amounts to be, you know, the journey towards a product market fit. And product market fit can look a lot different at a lot of different scales. Does that mean, you know, $1 million in revenue, or 25 million in revenue, or bigger? So we're on that journey there. And one of the, you know, I think the core values that we can add, you know, I think for us, it is helpful, even with our foundation here, to have connections into other ecosystems, to tap into other potentials. And, you know, I think that's one of the things that I see like a core value that we can provide, both on a custom solution side and our core, you know, core offering side, is like, you know, our kind of intention is to connect, you know, people, connect information, connect to groups, connect to agents. And the more, I guess, even if you think about like how synapses work in the brain, the more that we're able to have a robust, you know, product and services that connect people and enterprises and businesses to what they need, I think, you know, will just provide more value to the market, is more or less what I think.
Was somebody else going to go? Sorry. Is that me? I'm echoing. I wanted to ask you guys, you know, I don't think that I think that a lot of the times in this space, we just kind of take for granted kind of the journey, you know, how difficult it really is to try to build something sustainably in blockchain, kind of at the business level. You see a lot of stuff launch, but you don't see a lot of things sustain themselves over a long period of time. What has that kind of been like? And maybe I'll start with Brandon. I know you were like, I think you kind of went full bore into Hgraph, if I'm not mistaken. Like, you kind of made the decision because you were doing pretty consistent podcasts and some other stuff too. And I'm sure it's just weighs on your bandwidth, but what has it been like to kind of try to architect and build something out that, you know, you feel like is going to be sustainable and just last and provide value and help to grow any network or project that you guys work with?
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm really fortunate to be able to do work that I love and be able to identify where I can provide most value. I mean, I said it on the last episode of my show in October, which was like that show, Hashgraph Enthusiast, was the most important way I could bring value to the ecosystem. And, you know, after working at Hgraph, it just becomes clear, like, no, it's no longer the thing. I think that the work that I'm doing at Hgraph is the best work of my career. And I think that that's the spirit of a startup. That's kind of what drives you. And I think that's what kind of keeps you going. Kind of to your point is like, you know, and we were talking a bit about this before the show too, is like, how do you, you know, stave off burnout? How do you stay dedicated? How do you stay focused? How do you stay energized? And it just comes down to being fortunate to be on a great team and just do work that you really enjoy doing in a space that gets you really excited, like being able to work in blockchain and AI and these different types of things. Just very fortunate. So I think that, like, from my standpoint, as long as you stay focused on what's most interesting and really just try to hone your skills, get as much feedback as quickly as possible, fail as quickly as possible, in this space, and just kind of, it sounds cheesy, but like, you know, embrace the journey versus the destination. Because as we've learned, the destination in this industry is non-existent. You know, so I think that just personally from my side, it's just been an honor working with Brett and Tyler. It's just been great.
Brett, I'm curious your take too. I mean, you come from a pretty storied background with some of the entities that you've been involved with, and I'm always interested to hear kind of that thought process. And everybody that I've heard talk about it says, you know, just kind of a light bulb went off at some given time. But what's your experience been like, and why'd you kind of make the decision to go full bore into Hgraph?
Yeah, that's a great question. A little bit loaded, a semi-docs here just for those watching. So I spent a lot of time in the Hedera ecosystem under the name HBAR Gremlin. So I spent a lot of time doing research and understanding networks, really just for that particular reason. I created a crypto Twitter just so that I could better understand what was happening and learn more about each respective networks, the network, the community they're building, and things like that. It got to a point probably in 2022, maybe early 2023, where I was sitting at a financial institution. I was incredibly comfortable, and that's great. But at some point in my career, I wanted to skate where the puck was going. And it became very clear to me that this was an inevitable solution for a lot of businesses. And then you pile on AI and the efficiencies driven by AI, and it's a no-brainer for margin expansion for a lot of companies. And I'd rather be on the DLT and AI side of the business. I happened to see a tweet from Tyler that was like, hey, hiring a head of business development. I had done some research on Hgraph, and I spoke with Brandon about it. Then I spoke with Tyler, probably spent 12 hours in video calls, maybe a little more, trying to understand the business, how it operated, their needs, what they do for customers, and ultimately, over time, decided to make the jump to Hgraph. So I'm not sure that really did much for anyone, but that's the ramble on how I ultimately came to the conclusion to move.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler, I guess same thing for you. You don't get to get out of this question, I guess. But how has it been to continue kind of building in this space? I mean, I know it's not always easy to maintain motivation, but at the end of the day, I feel like if for those that feel like they're actually trying to build something that contributes value, are usually the people that end up hanging around. Maybe just your broad thoughts.
Yeah, I think I've building a startup has been my career path and goal since I started in working as a person. So I have run some businesses in the past. I've coached other businesses in the past. And I guess everything that I've ever studied and read and experienced and observed, kind of describes on how to be successful, creating something brand new that creates value in the world. And so far, I'm experiencing the research that we've done. We've experienced the trouble. We've experienced the grit, the tenacity. When I used to recruit for what amount to be small businesses, one of the things that we'd one of the metrics of successful person for one of our businesses would be tenacity, and sticking through things and whatnot. So in our startup world, there's a lot of that, and we've put in a whole bunch of work, and so one of the things that I try to stay present with is like, we'll enjoy that. If it's hard work, it might be valuable. Enjoy I guess it's more the joy of the journey thing, but we've experienced a lot of the hard work. And some of the things that are some of the big successes that we've had too, it just makes it worth it. Whether it be a small internal goal or a small new thing that we do, or something a little bit more broad, like, each step of maturity that our business goes through is quite exciting, and it's like super fulfilling. And the other kind of, the other thing that is intriguing to put, I suppose, this much effort and commitment to building a sustainable business is honestly the upside. There's a lot of potential when you're in full control. There's a lot of potential when you get to decide what piece of the market that you serve, who the people that you work with, what it is that you're doing in the world. And I think, the types of people that enjoy working with us, have that sort of mentality as well, that they, want to be a part of a team that is, or work with a team, whether it be a customer or a partner or whatever it may be, that is in control of their own destiny and has similar goals and, I guess, ambitions, I suppose, in a career path. So that was kind of a long way.
Yeah, no, you're good. I think one of the things that I see consistently in this space over time is that, like, for startups that are trying to build something sustainable, that kind of journey into, like, just, chipping away at the iceberg to make meaningful relationships in the short term, maybe not short term is not the best way of putting it. It's a lot of work to kind of initially chip away at the iceberg. But what I've kind of seen happen is that, like, okay, once opportunities arise and, like, you get a foot in the door, it becomes a proving ground to kind of take it to, another entity as a solutions provider or whatever it is. Have you guys experienced something similar as far as, like, having integration points that you feel like are kind of have led into easier conversations for future integration points? And, what types of discussions are you excited about having in the future? Given that you guys are kind of proving out different clientele right now, where are you guys at right now? Where do you see that kind of going? Maybe I'll go with Brandon there.
Yeah, I'll go back to something I mentioned previously, which was, there's these two sides to the Hgraph company, right? Which is, one is these products and services and APIs that we offer, and then the other side is the different, consulting and services and different things that we do, and they work really well together. And so what I would say is that it kind of works both ways. To your point, like, one way that it works is when we launched our our Hedera API services, the REST API, the GraphQL API, and those pricing plans and the easy sign up and the free accounts. Those things are all so exciting, and so you see people come in and try testing the software out and checking things out, and it really does a great job in starting those conversations with enterprises and organizations, because there's some context there. There's something you can reach out. There's something you can demo. We all know that in this industry, in the tech industry, you live or die by a great demo. And the best demo is something, as simple as it is, that they can reach out and utilize. But then the other side of it is, we have many conversations with, different enterprises and organizations and even other startups in the ecosystem, where they highlight, some pain points, or they highlight some opportunities that we go, hey, wait a minute, this applies directly to our broader customer base. And so we can work on developing those solutions and bring them back down through the value chain. And then potentially the customer with the free account gets a little boost. So it works both ways. And I mean, in this industry, I mean, product-led growth is a key strategy. You just simply take your marketing budget, you put it to product, and then you just hope the product is really, really great and attracts people. And that's a good strategy for startups. But that's what we've noticed is not just the product starting those conversations, getting those tractions, but it even before that happened, before we launched our new plans and everything like that in 2024 and 2023, it also works the other way, where a lot of the different consulting and advisory things that we do and software engineering that we do eventually makes its way back into our product. So it's a really interesting kind of circle of life, if you will.
I think, you can't fake authenticity, and you can't fake hard work, I think, is one of the things. And watching you guys kind of from afar is always interesting to me. And the open or the code base of Hedera, I guess I should say Hashgraph, transitioning over into it's Hero, right?
Hiro.
So I was pronouncing Hiro, and now I'm back to Hero.
Oh God, you heard Hero? Okay, so just maybe to provide my insight. So I sit on all of the technical steering committee meetings, and I do all the minutes, and I will put my name on the line and say it is Hiro, because it is named after hieroglyphic. It's a short term of hieroglyphic.
That's right.
So
I was saying Hiro for a while. I don't know why I'm in the Hero game today. But one thing that's interesting is so like watching, and even like openly supporting and participating in initiatives like that, which are, I feel like the Hiro stuff is just kind of super slept on. I think that even is going to potentially open up doors for you guys down the line, because, at the end of the day, for those that don't know, obviously Linux Foundation's pretty massive, and LF Decentralized Trust, which is where, Hiro kind of sits within. There's a lot of members within that initiative. We're talking like the DTCCs of the world, basically, for lack of better phrasing. So that I think is pretty cool, because at the end of the day, like, it's much easier to get into a conversation with somebody down the line if they've seen you putting in the work, or if you have a reference point for the work or a reference point for participation, than it is to be like, hey, I'm this random person that nobody knows. Why do you care? So yeah, shout out to you guys for joining all of those initiatives. I think it's super important to be front facing kind of at the infrastructure level of the Hedera ecosystem. And I guess I'll ask, how is the Hiro stuff going, Brandon, since you sit in all the meetings? I do not sit in the meetings.
Actually, so obviously getting things started. And just a quick note to everybody, all of the Hiro technical steering committee calls, they're all open Zoom calls, so anyone can attend. But just a quick note on that. I mean, really, I think that this recent few weeks and months have been huge. I mean, Michael Cantor from the community and Milan were brought on to the technical steering committee as well. So, with Hgraph building on this network, this is what the future of open source DLT development looks like. So I think that this is a trend we're going to see propagate throughout these ecosystems. So I think that as Hgraph continues looking into these other ecosystems like Ethereum and Bitcoin and Avalanche and stuff, I think us being on the cutting edge of kind of the open source side of things, there's a lot of value we can bring to those other networks from our experiences here. But I would say, I agree with you, Ryan. I mean, people got to pay attention to what's going on in Hiro, especially now. Of course, leading up to this point, it's been a lot of admin and getting things going and booting up, but the burners are on. They're cooking over there. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. So I wanted to ask, as far as data access is concerned, like, what opportunities do you think, and you mentioned Ethereum, and I know the Hedera ecosystem and developers are kind of working very diligently and have been for a while to kind of build up that EVM equivalence. As we start seeing more kind of crossover from different networks kind of intermingling with Hedera, I can think of like maybe even like Chainlink and using like some of the Chainlink standards and stuff. What types of kind of opportunities does that open up for you guys to kind of measure some of that stuff, or provide certain, pieces of data that kind of deals within, I guess, the network growth alongside other networks kind of interoperating more with the network? It's a really loaded question.
No, that's okay. I can take it and then maybe throw it to Tyler or Brett. But initially, I mean, there's two sides to it. There's like the public statistics. So like an example of that would be like HederaStats.com or something where it's like, oh, okay, here's a public look at what's happening on the network. And then there's also private dashboards and different things that, various projects will use or organizations and stuff. And we work on both sides, but the key aspect to it is like these open source shared methodologies. So no matter what is measuring who and where, everybody's kind of on the same page. So as it pertains to like the EVM side of things, it's critical right now at this stage in the ecosystem to know what's going on and why things are or aren't working. What's the rate of adoption? Just off the top of my head, certain things like how many people are holding, ERC20 tokens, or how many people are holding ERC 721 tokens. We're seeing wallets adding support for those types of things. So it is, of course, from the data standpoint, but also Hgraph is also supporting in, other aspects of those things like the JSON RPC relay. And, you brought up Hyro, and we're collaborating with LimeChain on a couple things in that regard. But it's just as it pertains to the EVM side of the network, we're going, full bore, not just from the data component, but also from the development side and supporting in other ways as well, not just data. But broadly, yeah, EVM is huge for Hedera right now. But Tyler, Brett, I don't know if you had anything to add on those points.
Yeah, well, I guess at a high level from a business perspective, as it relates to data, I think building a cohesive graph is incredibly important, as Tyler mentioned at the beginning of the show, right? I think from businesses are ultimately going to multi-chain likely over time, especially. And in order to make decisions based on a complete data set is incredibly important. So I think it'll be a competitive advantage for us to ensure that we have the right data sets in our bare metal infrastructure and be able to provide it the fastest, right? Latency will be important as well. So that's where a competitive advantage in the bare metal may help too. So that's Tyler, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about kind of our goals as a company to grow, playing in, expanding bigger markets is generally kind of a logical step. Additionally, if we think about the intentions of, let's say, like the Hedera network, there's probably some pretty clear and obvious goals that the foundation has, or Hashgraph has, or retail investors have, or just the ecosystem as a whole has. We believe that by being a part of both parties can help this ecosystem as a whole as well. I think user growth, clearly price appreciation, a variety of different things. Like it's hard for me to point to a reason why it would be bad for us to provide more value across different marketplaces.
So we'll ramp it down here in a second with you guys, but I wanted to ask, just for those that aren't aware, maybe which different network services can Hgraph kind of provide data into, or is there overlap with all the services? Do you guys see more in certain services rather than others? Just kind of broad strokes here, if you guys can kind of inform people that might not be aware, because obviously the architecture of the network is kind of segmented out, whether it be consensus or the token service or the file service or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, and maybe I'll speak about a couple of the features that make our core services even make the network more accessible. For example, the consensus service is what amounts to be a pub sub service where you can post messages, and with more robust features than that, to get those messages that are posted, such as a JSON payload or some sort of a message that describes the location of an item in a supply chain or whatnot. That information comes from a mirror node. And one of the things that we have that is interesting for people are we've been running streams, and we also have subscriptions, real-time updates to any piece of the data on the network. You can write a pretty simple, or a query to in your application. You're not polling it. You're not going and fetching new data. Like any sort of whether it be a consensus message or a transfer of a token or the total volume of a token, we provide real-time updates in a variety of different ways. So long way to say is all of the services. And one of the things that we've done over the course of time is since we build kind of on the raw data layer of it before APIs happen, we work with our customers to build custom solutions into our platform so that they're getting what they need without too much effort, because the effort is put in on our side. So that's the summary.
I'm going to ask Brandon briefly here, like what you guys have kind of witnessed. You've launched a couple of pieces of tooling that leverage the data that Hgraph is providing out into the world. And excuse the siren, but Hedera Stats was really interesting, and I'm just curious your take. Like, obviously, we all expect the Hedera network to kind of grow and become more adopted, and all of that jazz, which is going to be fantastic. But what does that kind of look like to you? Like, based on like some of the stuff that you've released out into the wild now, is that like not even a drop in the bucket that what you guys are going to need to potentially provide out there in the future based on network growth? If you don't stop me, I'm going to keep asking more and more of a question, Brandon.
No, don't worry. I know. I was going to say clearly drop in the bucket. I mean, the theme here that we're trying to make clear from the Hgraph standpoint is, like many companies in this ecosystem, we started out in a really grassroots way, which is just the classic startup story. We had our own version of the Apple Garage, right? And maybe these days, maybe that's a Google Meet or a Zoom or something. I don't know. But basically, a lot of what I've heard in this ecosystem over the years is just the desire for these exports from the ecosystem. And it kind of goes to what you were talking about, Ryan, which is like, we have these things that we tack onto this ecosystem from externally. But the dream is, what big companies, what exciting brands, what breakthrough products get out into the mainstream crypto space, and effectively export the ideals of Hedera or the spirit of this network. That's what I think is really going to start that next level flywheel. And so I look at companies like Hashpack, like Saucer Swap, like Bonzo Finance, like Kabila, like many of our customers, and I look at Hgraph, and I think that a company like Hgraph is something that this ecosystem can really champion as one of those stories. I think Hgraph has a real shot of breaking out of the Hedera ecosystem. But the more instances we have of that, the more successful this ecosystem is going to be. And something else you mentioned is, I think a fear sometimes people have is that when that happens, then they forget about Hedera, right? And I think that we're in a unique position because when we will branch out into new ecosystems, that just creates so much more value for folks on Hedera. Because like Tyler said, we're building a graph of shared data across Web3. So it strengthens the network. So I think that, to your question, which I can't even remember what it originally was, but I think that for me, that's what it really comes down to, is like, it's just something I wanted to touch on in this conversation, because it's kind of like, it's something, I used to speak about, as a community member in the Hedera ecosystem, is just like seeing these companies kind of branch out versus just, being a spoke on other kind of wheels. And so it gets me excited about a lot of our customers, so many of the people I see out there, and then just being in one of these startups that's going to break out is very exciting. So that's how I think, if we talk about growing the pie, you gotta bite into some fresh slices. You know what I mean?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Summer is always interesting with 3 kids. So, you bring up a really perfect point too. And I think that, we don't, when we think about adoption of the technology, at the end of the day, like, I fervently believe that, 5, 10 years, however many years from now, as blockchain distributed ledger, as the Hashgraph gets kind of widely adopted, the only people that are going to be talking about metrics that we have kind of invented right now that we kind of talk about are probably like still us. And most people are just going to be like leveraging the technology, and it's just going to work. And, from Hgraph standpoint, you're going to see real world businesses leveraging the data within their applications, or for their clientele or whatever it may be. And they're probably just going to see, hey, you know, these processes saved X amount for our company, and I can show you that they saved X amount for our company because I have the data. And that's what people are going to care about. I want to ramp down here and ask you guys, maybe I'll start with Brett. We'll do a round robin. What you're excited about for the future, where people can go to learn more about Hgraph tools and services, what you're excited about for Hedera, wherever you want to take it, Brett, and we'll do round robin here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think I'm most excited about probably enterprise and government adoption, and NGOs as well. I see a lot of opportunity in a lot of areas, right? Think of some of the legacy, just, rubber stamp paper operations where there's an exorbitant amount of fraud, things that we can build and have contemplated building with various entities out there. And if you want to check us out, hgraph.com is the easiest way to do it. Hedera APIs, enterprise tabs, or you can reach out to me directly. I'm just going to go ahead and take the risk here and put it out there. And if I get a bunch of emails, great. You can reach out to me at brett@hgraph.com. And that's where I'm at. Appreciate it.
No problem. And Tyler, same question to you. What are you excited about for the future?
So we recently as a team went to Consensus, and I was just really pumped after that conference, and in a large part, I think a large part of it was stablecoins, and it became, to me, we talk about these metrics, whether they're vanity metrics or whether we're still figuring out how important they are. Like you mentioned, like TVL, maybe that's of the list of KPIs, where does that sit? Currently it's pretty high. But yeah, after Consensus, I was just really like, I see, it's like, okay, this is the reason this technology is superior. Stablecoins really help bring institutional, wealth into the ecosystem, or into the industry, and the industry serves the broader marketplace with new features, which is why we're all here in the space. All the things that DLT has promised to do, I think we're really starting to see, like, oh, okay, it's not just an option to choose, going down this path. It is now that we're close to being like, oh, you have to, like, this is the only logical way to do things now. Maybe it's not the perfect analogy, but I think about, like, a little bit before, like, at one point, at least, yeah, I know some economies still are a cash-based economy, but for the most part, like, it's almost obvious that it's all digital. But you go 50 years back, and we're exchanging, physical monies. So I guess I see there is a technical evolution that we're all a part of, and I think having that all come to fruition and being a part of that as a whole is incredibly exciting.
I think it's interesting too, and I brought this up a couple of times before whenever we've had Brandon on. Leveraging data to empower your business. And I think I took it from more of like the retail project standpoint, where I'm X project, I have a platform that launched. Maybe I leverage Hgraph, and I'm able to actually prove real on Hedera metrics, and potentially go out and get more funding. That was kind of the example I used before. But even to take that a step further, that same thing applies for enterprise and institutions, where you integrate distributed ledger technology for some sort of process or to alleviate pain points within some sort of process or authenticate or validate certain parts of something. And you should be able to, and you will be able to in the future, I'm sure, go in and hold on a second. Sorry about that. Go in and pinpoint the savings or, the overhead that was, eliminated by having that data in front of you. So you can take it from the retail and the project standpoint for really empowering them, but you can also take that at kind of the enterprise or institutional standpoint. And what that really does is it creates like a flywheel effect with real world businesses, institutions, enterprises, leveraging the technology, saving money for the next enterprise to do the same thing and the next enterprise to do the same thing. And I think it's really interesting. Brandon, I'm going to let you ramp us out here. What you're excited about for the future of Hgraph, the Hedera ecosystem, or the space as a whole.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just take a minute to, I think maybe what I'll leave with is just some gratitude to kind of just our partners and customers and clients. I mean, I remember last year, Rob Allen on the Hedera Governing Council was talking about wanting to make the organizations more fit for purpose, get rid of some of these issues, all these different types of things. And and being in the business this year and the conversations we're having, the things that we're seeing, it's incredible to see what's happening at Hedera, at the Hedera Foundation, at Hashgraph, at the Hashgraph Association. I think that it's just incredible stuff. And likewise, it all has knock-on effects, positive knock-on effects throughout the ecosystem. I think that we're just seeing a lot of energy and like our business, other businesses growing, new people moving around, seeing success. So I just think that's amazing. And just, we wouldn't be here without, those logos on our website and our customers and the people we speak with every week. So just huge amount of gratitude to everyone there. And anyone who wants to come aboard the journey with Hgraph, you can grab a free API, you can get started there. And as you can clearly see, the sky's the limit with us. So
awesome. Well, I definitely wanted to mention, if you guys are interested in checking out Hgraph, data access into the Hedera ecosystem, as they mentioned too, boots on the ground kind of advisory aspects. And these guys are looking to help projects launch solutions in Hedera and then, ultimately beyond, as we've heard today. Go to hgraph.com and check out all the API aspects on their site, enterprise solutions, and give these guys a follow on at hgraph_io. You can also go to the docs, docs.hgraph.com. I want to give a huge shout out to Hashpack for helping us to put these podcasts together. Hashpack is the premier wallet on Hedera. Brandon, Tyler, and Brett, thank you guys so much for joining today. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm not on my A game, but you guys corrected my rambling a few times. Brett, congratulations on the role. It's awesome to see. I'm really excited to continue to kind of witness the growth of Hgraph. And I'm excited to see what kind of relationships you guys develop and what kind of value you guys contribute, not only to Hedera, but the wider Web3 space. So thank you guys. Hang out with me for a second as I ramp this down, and thank you to everybody that watched.